Welcome to this short sequence of videos about the dynamic model of care home provision that's intended to help county councils in assessing their response to the UK Care Act. This is part of a project carried out by Lang Buisson for the County Council's Network Care Bill Implementation Group. The purpose of doing this model analysis is to work out how demand and supply for care home places will interact, given the likely changes that will take place in the marketplace in response to that Care Act. That will allow local authorities to test sensitivities to uncertain behaviours on the part of consumers and on the part of providers for residential and nursing home capacity. And we can test those sensitivities both individually, and we can put various sensitivities together to produce combined scenarios for what could possibly happen. Given that, the local authorities will be able to test alternative policies, in particular on fee rates, but also on their choices of the mode of care that they encourage for elderly residents. And that in turn will allow them to estimate the financial implications of the Care Act going out into the future. Now, these videos cover a number of topics. First of all, we explain what the model does and why it's important. We then go on to explain the standard spreadsheet that we're producing for each county or local authority, and within that spreadsheet the base case and standard scenarios that we've made available. Now, in order to run this spreadsheet and figure out what the answers might be, there is a little Excel add-in that needs to be installed so that it's possible to run the dynamic model, which actually sits somewhere else on a server outside of your systems. It's a relatively small and simple add-in, but you do need to do it carefully, and there are also some technical requirements for your systems to enable that to happen. When you've done that, you can actually interact with the spreadsheet and the model. You get the spreadsheet to send input information into the model sends the results back, and then you can compare the scenarios with the base case results in the spreadsheet. Now, finally, we should mention that this work has all been done on a set of standard assumptions which are the same for all of the 12 counties who originally requested this work. Clearly, conditions will vary substantially between different counties, but nevertheless we do have this common set of assumptions about the future, the base case if you like, going forward, and that allows results to be compared across counties. But those standard results will not necessarily reflect things that you know are going to happen in a particular local authority area. So a further option you have is to create a separate copy of this spreadsheet and populate it with some county specific or local authority specific base case assumptions and numbers. So there's a final segment of the video that will explain how to do that. So let's start with this issue of what the model does and why it is important. The structure of the model is that it starts with the numbers of people in elderly age groups and the needs of each of those age groups for different kinds of care, depending on the preferences of the people themselves and council policy towards what kinds of care will be provided or recommended. And that gives us what we call latent demand. That's the demand that is coming from those residents for each of the age groups involved. If we compare that with the number of homes and places that are available, and we've split that between residential homes and nursing homes, you get an assessment of the potential occupancy for homes and the actual current occupancy of homes. Now, when we say potential occupancy, that simply means that if demand is much higher than the capacity of the homes to supply that demand, then you could have a potential occupancy of over 100%, which would clearly be unrealistic. So it's calculating what that potential might be if there's a shortage of places. If you multiply the number of people who are in residence in homes by the fee rates that are coming from those residents, and that fee rate differs between people who are self-funding, people who are funded by the local authority or the NHS. So if you multiply the occupancy by the numbers of people in those groups and the fee rates they're paying, then that works out the revenue that care homes of each type actually receive. From that revenue, we take away the operating costs for the homes, and again we're splitting those between residential homes and nursing homes. that gives you the current profitability of care homes in that category. If that profitability is too low, there's a risk that the least profitable homes will actually not be able to keep operating, and those homes will close, reducing the capacity that's available and raising the occupancy for those homes that remain. On the other hand, if the profitability is high enough compared with the cost of building new homes or even adding additional rooms to homes that already exist, then that gives you an estimate of what the potential return on investment would be for adding capacity. So if you put yourself in the shoes of a care home operator, this return on investment is essentially saying to you, is it worthwhile building new capacity? If that return on investment is adequate, then developers start to plan for and construct new homes, and that adds to the capacity and reduces the potential occupancy, reduces any shortage that there is in the marketplace. However, it takes quite a while to plan for and build new homes and added rooms for existing homes. So you have a construction delay arising between a decision to add capacity and that capacity actually coming on stream. So you could in principle have shortages of capacity for quite some time before any construction actually gets completed and takes that shortage away for you. It's important to note that new homes and rooms may be built even when current occupancy is not very high, if a particular operator believes, for example, that they can fill any new places they build by doing a better job than existing homes do. The essential structure of the model is quite important because it features feedback effects that make a big difference to what happens in practice. What's going on in the model at a high level is that we're comparing capacity with demand, and that tells us what occupancy is going to be. If occupancy and fee rates lead to good profitability, then that profitability leads to investment and a change in capacity. If profitability is too low, then you get disinvestment and a fall in capacity. Now that's what's called a balancing feedback mechanism, and what that does is it corrects any mismatch between supply and demand in this particular market. But that only happens if conditions allow that correction to take place. So for example, if fee rates are so low that no one would make adequate profit from opening a new home, then the investment isn't going to take place, the capacity won't come on stream, and you'll be left with too high occupancy, effectively shortages of supply. And it's important to note that demand is not a kind of absolute number. It will adjust depending on the supply of what's available and the cost of taking up that supply. You would expect that at higher fee rates, then fewer people will choose to fund their own places in a care home and perhaps stay at home instead. Now, these delays in building and indeed in closing homes allow imbalances between capacity and demand to continue for quite some time, and this has very, very important consequences, because what it leads to is cycles of excess and shortage. So if you've got a shortage of capacity at this particular moment in time, it'll take you, say, 2 or 3 years to build the new capacity. Meanwhile, demand keeps on going up and the shortage gets worse and worse and worse until that supply comes on stream. This is a very difficult phenomenon to deal with, and it's typically made worse by policy responses that are aimed at fixing things. What typically happens is that when there is a shortage, too many people decide it's a good idea to build new capacity, so when the capacity comes on stream, you actually move from a shortage of places to an over-provision. Now, this is very common in many industries, and the ways that you typically alleviate this cyclicality that can arise is by making available transparent information to all providers. So if a provider is looking to open a new home in a county where they think there is a shortage, if they are already aware of the fact that 4 or 5 other homes are already in the process of being built, then they'll think twice about adding another home to make the oversupply worse. And the other mechanism that alleviates this problem is consistent policy. If local authorities, for example, cut back their fee rates when there is plenty of capacity available, then you remove the incentive for anyone to build new capacity, and that will be okay for a while, but then it will make things really bad when a shortage does occur and nobody has actually started on the construction of any capacity to fulfill that demand. So why do systems cause problems? Well, you have critical factors accumulating over long periods of time, and obviously in this case we've got very big factors that do that, like the long-term growth in numbers of people needing care, the long periods of time it takes to build capacity. There's interdependence in the system. The profitability of the homes depends on how many residents there are, what the mix of the residents is in terms of who's paying for their care, the fee rates, and the profitability reflects the cost levels and so on. There are feedback mechanisms in all of this. I've just explained the most important ones of those. And there are also rather critical thresholds. So good changes don't do anything until the tipping point is reached, or else we get bad surprises. And the obvious threshold here is that nobody is going to invest until the profitability of opening a new home is adequate. But as soon as it is adequate, lots of people open new homes. Equally, if profitability is low, then care home operators may struggle on until profitability just gets so low that they can't cope, and all of a sudden quite a lot of homes close and capacity drops by quite a lot. And the method behind our model, called System Dynamics, deals explicitly and quantitatively with all of these mechanisms. So this is what System Dynamics is. It's the use of quantified causal diagrams and simulation models to understand and manage issues that feature complex behaviour caused by these stock accumulation and feedback mechanisms. And these things occur just about everywhere. They certainly occur here in this market for the supply and demand of care home capacity for the elderly. So how does the user interact with this model? Well, we've created a control model that sits on top of a generalized model of the market, and that in turn is supported by smaller submodels for each size and category of home. So the model handles the difference between residential homes and nursing homes, small homes and large homes, homes operated by for-profit providers and not-for-profit providers. But that control model accepts data for any local authority and works out the results. The spreadsheet that we've made available for each local authority is provided to you with actual data for 2005 to 2014 and conservative base case estimates for the period 2015 to 2025. So for example, what might happen to cost inflation, what might happen to changes in the demographic profile of the elderly people in that area. So that spreadsheet sends data to the control model. The control model runs the market model, generates scenario results, and sends those results back to the spreadsheet. So you as the user over here on the left hand side can create a range of scenarios, tell the spreadsheet to go do its thing. The spreadsheet runs the model and shows you the results of the scenario you've just created. So how do you do that? Well, you set future values for chosen items. So you alter the base case values, for example, for fee rates or the mix of who's paying for care, that describe a chosen scenario in the spreadsheet. You then tell the spreadsheet to send the values to the model runs and sends the results back to the spreadsheet, and then you can produce any desired analysis or charting you want of those results in the spreadsheet. The even better news is that you may not need to do this because each county-based data and scenario spreadsheet already contains data and results for a set of standard scenarios. Those scenarios were requested by a steering group of councils who originally sponsored this work. There's a set of scenarios we're calling A, and those are about the risk that there will be a reduction in the premium paid by self-funded occupants of care homes compared with the prices paid by local authorities. And there are three different scenarios under that general heading. Scenario B looks at what would happen if there was a reduction in capacity, for example, because quality concerns lead to temporary closures of capacity. Scenario C allows you to look at what happens if people who would normally go into residential homes are diverted, for example, being cared for in their own homes instead. Scenario D looks at lower increases in fee rates compared with the base case. So the base case assumes that local authority fee rates will grow by 2% a year, so what would happen if those fee rates only grew by 1% a year? And scenario D7 looks at a lower growth in fee rates paid by self-funders as well. Lastly, scenario E looks at what would happen if, for example, increasingly high quality homes mean that more people want to go into residential homes than do so currently. So that looks at an increase in the fraction of 75 plus year olds going into residential care. There are some further scenarios that it's possible to test. We can look at what happens if residents pay additional top-ups over their local authority funded care. We can look at what happens if NHS payments rise to get more people out of hospital into nursing homes, and so on.